Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Got another book, or I should say document, to review. Series 174. It's an encyclopedia, or dictionary, arts and sciences, and miscellaneous literature, in 3 volumes, illustrated with copper plates. Volume 2, and you know how encyclopedias are. Each book goes from different letters of the alphabet to different letters. And this is from E-L-E to P-H-I, Volume 2. So obviously Volume A, or Volume 1, would be from A to E, and Volume 3, which would be from P to Z. Published apparently in Philadelphia, printed by Budd and Bartram for Thomas Dobson at the Stone House, North 41 South 2nd Street, in 1803, a little over 200 years ago. One of my commenters sent me a reference to this about the Illuminati, like page 211. It took me a while to track down this encyclopedia in PDF form. You can see it says 1803 on the bottom. Unbelievable information. I've talked to people about my research over the years. And when I mention things like Zionism, which is in the Encyclopaedia Judaica, I have that whole set of books. If I haven't shown them, I've got all 16 of these. You can find them used at used bookstores online. I actually got lucky. It took me a month, but under $100, I got all 16 of these. Pretty heavy, including free shipping. The Encyclopaedia Judaica, which has a lot of information on the Kabbalah, the Illuminati, Zionism. So it does exist. And how can you argue with an encyclopedia from 1803? Wait till you hear what I'm going to read. Obviously, also, it's a couple hundred years old, so there's no copyright. So I can read word for word, which is what I intend to do. Leave no stone unturned, lest anybody think it doesn't exist. Unbelievable. So that was the first page. And the first ELE was on electrometer. It's kind of fascinating to read about electricity 200 years ago. So I was looking at that briefly. The top subject there. And then it took me a little while to navigate through 700 or 800 pages. But I managed to find out where Illuminati started in this encyclopedia, published, like I said, in 1803. So it's difficult to find this old encyclopedia. If you can find it in PDF, then it's kind of even difficult to get it downloaded and navigate on your computer. And it has another problem, which will pop up while I'm reading this document. This 16 pages, I'll probably only get to about 4 of them on this video. So it seems to me I'll be making part 2 and part 3. I think it's that important. But apparently, for whatever reason, a lot of the S's in the encyclopedia were printed out with F's. Like right here where my hand is. If you want to look, you can see the word Freemasonry. But it has an F instead of the S. So when you're reading, the first line on this thing here. So when you're reading, first line of where my finger is, look at that first line in the center of this video. Freemasonry has an F where the S should be. So as I was reading it, I had to kind of program my brain to interpret all those F's as S's. Took me a while, but I got used to reading it. Alright, you're not going to believe what it's going to say. I'm not even going to waste time. I'm just going to read through this thing. Illuminati, page 202 in this encyclopedia, published in 1803, is the name which was assumed by a secret society or order founded on the 1st of May, 1776, by Dr. Adam Wusthof, professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt. So I'm sure I will continue to say some of these words wrong, but I think you're going to get the idea of the conversation. The real object of this order was, by clandestine arts, to overthrow every government, every religion, to bring the sciences of civil life into contempt, and to reduce mankind to that imaginary state of nature when they lived independent of each other on the spontaneous productions of the earth. So they want us to go back to the ancient times and live like cavemen lived. They want to destroy the world as we know it, and it sounds so unbelievable. I'm going to have to put this up here, let you see it so you believe it. It's all about believing. You can pause your computer. Read that first paragraph. Unbelievable. 1803, Encyclopedia. You think they're lying? All right. Its avowed object, however, was very different. So what they said they were doing was very different. It professed a diffute. Again, these F's are S's, so it causes me a moment to get my brain to work here. It professed a defute from secret societies, as from so many centers, the light of science is over the world, to propagate the purest principles of virtue, and to reinstate mankind into the happiness which they enjoyed during the golden age fabled by the poets. So what they're telling the world is they want to bring us back to some golden age as mentioned by the ancient poets. But meanwhile, it just said that they're trying to destroy the world as we know it. And you can make your own determination which is true as I read on. Such an object was well adapted to make a deep impression on the ingenious minds of youth, and to young men alone, Wusthof at first addressed himself. So when I see this word addressed, it's got two F's there, and you want to say addressed, and himself is himself, because there's an F where the S should be. So just making you know that it's a little difficult for me to read it, but I can read it. It will naturally occur to the reader that the means of attaining this glorious object should have been made as public as possible, that the veil of secrecy thrown over the proceedings of the order were calculated to excite suspicion, and to keep even young men of virtue and celibacy at a distance. In any other country than Germany, secrecy might perhaps have had this effect, but various circumstances conspired there to make it operate as a powerful attraction. So they were making this mysticism, these Illuminati lodges, make it seem like a powerful attraction. Ever since Freemasonry had acquired such reputation throughout Europe, a multitude of petty secret societies had been formed in the universities of Germany, each having its lodge, its master, its mysteries, all modeled on those founded by Masons coming from England and Scotland. So they were copying these other Masonic institutions. Before the foundation of Wuchthoff's order, these lodges, we believe, were in great hamlets, or if they were productive of any evil, so general harmless. So we believe that many of them were generally harmless, and if they were productive of any evil, it was only by giving the youth of the universities a state of secrecy and mysticism. So that was the attraction. On this Wuchthoff availed himself as soon as he had conceived the outlines of his plan and digested part of his system. He initiated two of his own pupils, to whom he gave the names of, and Wuchthoff was a teacher or a professor at a university in the town of, I just mentioned it here, Ingolstadt, Germany. And there's some notes on the bottom here, so I may as well pay attention to them and share what they say. Such we are sorry to say, you got to pay attention to those F's, is the Cafe Still. In a letter dated 10th of May 1799, which we received from a gentleman of learning and honor on refining in Upper Saxony, that would be Britain, is the following account of the University of Jena. The university contains from 2,000 to 3,000 students. We are almost all Republicans and go about the country in Republican uniforms. They are all formed into clubs or secret societies, and the quarrel among one member of a club is taken up by all. The consequences is that the number of duels among the different clubs is inconceivable. So apparently they have a lot of duels with swords, or maybe the old-fashioned guns. The weapon is generally the saber. The duel often ends in the death of one of the combatants. Yet gentlemen of Great Britain send their sons to Germany to be educated. The next page. So Wuchthoff's two first initiates he named Ajax and Tiberius, assuming that of Spartacus for himself. So according to my research, I think George Bush Jr. at Skull and Bones, his secret name was Spartacus. These two disciples, soon vying with their matter in impidity, for it will be seen by and by that he was the most impious, he judged them worthy of being admitted to his mysteries. So what is these mysteries, which I suspect is like the Theophist Society or the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism? So there's two obvious components to these secret societies. One of their goals is world domination, destroying the world as we know it, taking it back to Neanderthal times, so certain peoples can control the whole world. And number two, some kind of mysteries, which obviously they want to keep secret societies. So I suspect it's part of the Luciferic, satanic, demonic religion, something they would not want to share with the rest of us. So two components: control of the world and some kind of witchcraft knowledge. Being admitted to his mysteries, you can just substitute the word witchcraft, and conferred on them the highest degree which he had yet invented. He called them Areopagites, I'm probably saying that wrong, Areopagites, dominated this monstrous association. The order of Illuminati, or Illums, and installed himself general of the order. So Wusthof made himself general of the order. When public reports spread the news in Germany of this new order, having been founded in the University of Ingolstadt by Wusthof, it was generally supposed to be one of those little college lodges which could not this F and T is messing with me, could not interest the adepts after they had finished their studies. So people didn't think it would affect the students forever. Many even thought that Wusthof, who was at that time a sworn enemy of the Jesuits, makes you wonder. And I think that was a facade. I don't think they were sworn enemies. Had founded this lodge with no other view than to form a party for himself against these fathers, who after the suppression of their order had been continued in their offices of public teachers at the University of Ingolstadt. In this opinion, the Illuminatis were at pains to propagate. His character, too, was at this time such as to remove every suspicion from the public mind. So he wanted to portray himself to the public mind as something that he wasn't. A seemingly affinity to his duty and a great slew of zeal and erudition in expounding the laws easily miffed people to believe that his whole time and talents were engrossed with the study of them. And if we are to credit his own account, Ingolstadt had never witnessed a professor so well calculated to add new luster to its university. This seems indeed to have been the general opinion as well as his own, for some time after the foundation of his order, he applied himself with such diligence and apparent candor to his duties of his office that he was chosen by Abbé Burrell's translator, calls superior of the university. So apparently Wusthof was made the superior of the university. This new dignity only added to his hypocrisy and furnished him with a fresh means of carrying out his dark designs. This is an encyclopedia published in 1803. This stuff's in writing, if you can believe it. He converted his house into one of those boarding houses where young men, perpetually under the eye of their masters, are supposed to be better preserved than anywhere else from the dangers which threatened them at that age. So they had to guard these young men 24/7. If you want to put that into New Age terms. He solicited fathers and mothers to entrust their children to his care, and counterbalanced in secret the lessons which he was obliged to give in public. He sent home his pupils well disposed to continue the famed career of seduction which he himself carried on at Ingolstadt. Aristocratically impetuous, we see him. Aristocratically impetuous, we see him, says Mr. Barrow of the university that made Wuchthof the superior. In the 5th year of his illumination, aping the God of Christianity. I had to go look up the word aping. So what they were doing is they were mimicking or copying the religion of the Christians and installing those beliefs into these Illuminati groups, occults, lodges with all these initiates. Aping the God of Christianity and ordering Ajax, one of the new initiates under Wuchthof, his 2 first initiates, in the following terms, to propagate the doctrines of his new gospel. Did not Christ send his apostles to preach his gospel to the universe? You that are my Peter, why should you remain idle at home? Go then and preach. So Wuchthof chose those 2 people, Ajax and Tiberius, as his first 2 disciples. And then they were recruiting new initiates and expanding those 2 disciples to teach other people, who would create more disciples to create other people. And later on it turns out that there were millions of these people initiated into this new Illuminati gospel cult. Wait till you find out what they plan on doing. And I said that in the beginning of this document. Overthrowing the world governments as we know them. It said that. I read it in an 1803 encyclopedia and many other books. I've been reading this one here. I got to make a video on it right away. Secret Societies by John Lawrence Reynolds. Inside the Freemasons, the Yakuza, Skull and Bones, and the world's most notorious secret organizations, John Lawrence Reynolds. I've been reading this, and you can see the symbol there on the US $1 bill. I'm learning more and more what that symbol means. The all-seeing eye Horus, the sun's rays behind it, the sun god, the pyramid referencing the hieroglyphics in Egypt with the Isis and Osiris religion of the cults. Even Ra is mentioned in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. This is a really good book. Okay. Back to this document. This seems indeed to have been the general opinion as well as his own, for some time after the foundation of his order, he applied himself with such diligence and apparent candor to the duties of his office that he was chosen to be a superior. I read that. Sometimes I lose my place here. These preachers have yet received no particular designation, for when his first adepts were initiated, he was far from having completed the code of his order. 1776, the creation of the Illuminati order. He knew that years of experience were necessary to perfect the general system of initiations and trials, which according to the plan he had conceived, his novices were to undergo, but he could not endure the idea of sacrificing years to mere theoretical projects, and he flattered himself with the hopes of supplying the deficiencies in his incomplete code by provisional regulations and private instructions, and of acquiring associates who would receive his gospel implicitly and cooperate with him in all his views. At length, however, the code was completed, and he felt divided into two grand classes, and the sect divided into two grand classes. So when I said felt, it's because there's an F there, but it's sect. So sects are the same thing as cults, S-E-C-T-S. And each of these, again, subdivided into lesser degrees, proportion to the progress of the adepts, the initiates. So his organization is growing, and he's dividing these into groups. The first class is that of preparation. So the first degree is the degree of preparation. It contains 4 degrees: those of the novice, Minerva, minor Illumini, and the Illuminatus minor, and the major Illuminati, or Illuminatus major. To this class belong likewise some intermediary degrees borrowed from the Freemasonry as a means of propagation. Of the Masonic degrees, the code of the Illuminati admits the first 3 without any alteration. So in the Illuminati, the first 3 degrees were pretty much the same first 3 degrees in the Freemason material. And as I remind people in my videos, Series 61, Freemasonry and Satanism, on the Freemasonic Blue Lodge Handbook, I made 12 2-hour videos if you want to go watch them. 24 hours. I've taken my time in this process of book reviews and making videos. I'm completing my 4th year this month. So next month we'll start my 5th year of making videos on the books, and my 14th year of research. Since 2005, when I had a big 0 birthday, and I talked to some people and discovered there was things going on, and I wanted to figure out WTH. What the heck is going on? So step by step, looking under every little stone, I'm trying to find a clue to what is going on. And it seems I got a big clue right here. All right. Of the Masonic degrees, the Code of Illumination admits the first 3 without any alteration, but it adapts more particularly to the views of the sect of the degree of Scotch Knight, and styles it with the degree Illumini and Illuminatus. The second class is that of the mysteries. Here we go with like the Kabbalah, witchcraft, which are subdivided into the lesser and greater mysteries. The lesser comprehended the priesthood and the administration of the sect, or the degrees of priest, or of regents and princes. In the greater mysteries are comprehended the 2 degrees of Magnus, philosopher, and of the man-king. The elect of the latter compose the council and degree of Areopagitus. Eopagites. If you're a perfectionist and you want to know how to say that word and look it up, please do. The degree of Areopagitus. In all these classes and in every degree, says the Abbe Barral, there is an office of the utmost consequence, which is common to all the brethren. It is that which is occupied by him who is known in the code of the appellation as recruiter, brother, insinuator. So apparently this recruiter is called an insinuator. I-N, and again it has an F, I-N-S-I-N-U-A-T-O-R, and the best I can say is insinuator, and replace that word with recruiter. And maybe as I read on here, I'll mentally try to do it when I speak, so as to cause less confusion. This, continues our author, is not a term of my invention. It is really to be found in the code and in the domination of that Illuminati whose employment is to entice members into the sect. So the recruiter is supposed to entice members into the sect. As the whole strength of the order depended upon the vigilant and successful exercise of this office, some brethren were carefully instructed for it, who might afterwards visit the different towns, provinces, and kingdoms in order to propagate the doctrines of the Illuminati. So they were traveling around, promoting this Illuminati cult that was also into the mysteries. Wusthof professed to select as his apostles either weak men who would implicitly obey his orders. So the people he wanted to hire to work for him in this cult were weak men who would implicitly obey his orders, or men of abilities who would improve the office by artifices of their own. So he also wanted intelligent, strong men who would get involved and help strengthen the Illuminati. It was, however, a duty which every brother was obliged to exercise once or twice in his life, under the penalty of being forever condemned to the lower degrees. To stimulate the ardor of the brother recruiter, and exchanging the word for insinuator, to stimulate the ardor of the brother recruiter, he was appointed superior over every novice who he should convert. To assist his judgment, he was instructed in 3 important points concerning the description of men who he ought to select for conversion, the means which he ought to employ for enticing them to enter the order, and the arts which he ought to study to form their character. You're not going to believe what I'm going to be saying here, but it's here in the Encyclopedia, published in 1803. To enable the recruiter to determine who he ought to select for conversion, he was to infiltrate himself into all companies. He was to pry into the character of all whom he should meet with, whether friends, relations, strangers, or enemies. He was to write down all remarks regularly every day to point out their strong and their weak sides, their passions and prejudices, their intimacies, their interest, and their fortune. This journal was to be transmitted twice every month to the superiors. So these recruiters had to thoroughly check out every initiate, every new adept. into their personal life, what they thought, what they said, how they dressed, and report this to the superior twice a month. And that sounds like the material I went over in Series 152 with the Black Pope and the Jesuits. That's how they recruited people and ran their organizations also. Now, that's interesting. It's quite similar. I noticed that when I was reading this, I was saying to myself, well, this is the way they do it with the Jesuits. In that book I read, The Black Pope, Series 152, Freemasonry and Satanism, you can go watch. And you can find that PDF book, The Black Pope, online and read it for yourself. But I need to make more videos on that book too. By which means the order would learn who were, turn the page here, friendly and hostile to their views, and who were individuals to whom they ought to direct their arts of seduction. That's what it says here, arts of seduction. Moving on, page 204 in this encyclopedia. The persons to be excluded were all such as would expose the order to suspicion and reproach. All indiscreet talkers, all who were proved violent, difficult to be managed, all addicted to drunkenness, and all pagans, Jews, Jesuits were to be rejected. Now, isn't that interesting? Because obviously it is the Illuminati Rothschilds that spearheaded the financing to create the state of Israel. It's well documented. They even have Rothschilds Boulevard over there in Israel, Jerusalem. So there's a lot of deception here. We want to appear to be at opposite ends, but there are thousands of these secret societies, and they all oppose each other, just like you do with the Christian religions. You got the Baptist people saying bad things about the Catholics or the Protestants. The Protestants are saying the Baptists and the Catholics are all wrong, and the Catholics are saying that the Lutherans or the Baptists or the Protestants and all the other ones are wrong. They keep everybody at each other, all of us divided. That seems to be something most people should be able to agree on, just like the Republican and Democratic Party in the United States. How ridiculous is it they gave us choices like President Donald Trump or President Hillary Clinton? Millions of other men or women would have been better choices than those two, but they were part of the secret societies. Hillary Clinton used to report to the Heritage Foundation all the times and make jokes about it. George Bush came from the Skull and Bones and made jokes about it. What did George Bush Jr. once say on TV when he was on a talk show? If I had to tell you about the Skull and Bones, I'd have to kill you. Just saying. They want to make it amusing. They don't want we the people to take this stuff serious. As the patronage of princes would tend to enrich and strengthen the society, it was agreed to admit them to inferior degrees, but they were never to be initiated into the grand mysteries. Into witchcraft? Just interpreting this so you understand what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. They were never to rise beyond the degree of Scott Knight. That would be like the third degree in Freemasonry. The persons to be selected were young men of all stations, from 18 to 30, but particularly those whose education was not completed, and consequently whose habits were not formed. So they wanted people whose education was not completed and whose habits were not formed, again sounding like the schools of the Jesuits. Seek me out, says Wusthof in his directions to the recruiter. Again, I'm replacing the word insinuator. Seek me out, says Wusthof in his directions to the recruiter, the dexterous and dashing use. We must have adepts who are insinuating, intriguing, full of resource, bold, enterprising. They must be flexible and tractable, obedient, docile, sociable. In another place he says, above all things, pay attention to the figure and select the well-made men and handsome young fellows. They are generally of engaging manners and nice feelings. When properly formed, they are best adapted for negotiations, for first appearances presupposes in their favor. So good-looking people, I guess, get attracted to other people and are better at negotiators. It is true they have not the depth that men of more gloomy countenance often have. They are not the persons to be entrusted with a revolt. Wow, the Illuminati mentioning revolt here. Or the care of uprisings of the people, stirring up the people. Revolt or stirring up the people. So here I guess it admits that part of what they do is changing our world, is stirring up the people. And there's certainly a lot of that going on, like the recent protests or demonstrations in Richmond, Virginia, and Alabama with the white supremacist or white lives matter versus the black lives matter versus the KKK, in the women's march or the demonstrations not to build the fence between the USA and Mexico, in the gay agenda, transgenderism, and now with all these movie stars and politicians being accused of molestation or rape, etc., and coming out and sincerely apologizing and that they were wrong, completely across the board. You've got to wonder why all these people came out of the closets to make the accusations, and why all these well-known people were jumping at the bit to get out there and say they were wrong and they're sorry. How do you think that mentally affects our society? What's the intent there? Meanwhile, of course, they're promoting the gay agenda and the false flags, trying to disarm we the people in America, and all kinds of other crazy things going on in our world. Back to the document. I am particularly fond of those men whose very soul is painted in their eyes, whose foreheads are high, and whose countenances are open. Above all, examine well the eyes, for they are the very mirrors of the heart and soul. Observe the look and the gait and the voice. So see how confident these men are, how they walk. These are the ones we want. The Illuminati, he's saying. Every external appearance leads us to distinguish those who are fit for our school. Though young men were preferred, yet persons of all ages were to be admitted if their character accorded with the principles of the order. The recruiter was desired to seek out those who were distinguished by their power, riches, and learning. So we know that they recruited a lot of elite, wealthy people all over the world. Spare no pains, says Wusthof. Spare nothing in the acquisition of such adepts. If heaven refutes its success or succor, conjure hell. If heaven refutes its succor, conjure hell. Not quite sure what that means. Persons were to be singled out from those professions which give men influence over others, or put them in the most favorable situation for determining any particular opinions. With this view, schoolmasters, superintendents, ecclesiastic seminaries, so I guess people from school systems, were to be sought after with much care. Bank sellers, profit makers, secretaries of the post office were also to be selected. These professions, which accommodated men to speak and argue, as that of the counselors and attorneys, and every physicians, were also to be courted. They are worth having, says Wusthof, but they are sometimes real devils. Too difficult are they to be led. They are, however, worth having when they can be gained over. And just like in some of these organizations, like the Skull and Bones, etc., and going up higher levels in the Freemasons, apparently they have to get something on people like blackmail, whether it's adultery or theft of money or even child pedophilia. And they have to get some kind of thing on these wealthy people to blackmail them. According to my research over the years, every exertion was to be made to gain the offices of a prince, whether presiding over provinces or attending him in his councils. So anybody who works in high places in kingdoms or government are sought after. He that has done this has done more than if he has engaged the prince himself. There was also another description of men and women, and men, excuse me, not women. There was also another description of men of whom Wusthof had wisely judged that they would be admirably fitted for the diffusion of his doctrines. These were the disappointed and the dissatisfied. Select these in particular, says he, who have met with misfortunes, not from accidents, but from injustice. That is to say, in other words, the discontented. For such men are to be called into the bosom of illumination as into their proper asylum. Wow. When the recruiter had made choice of his victim, they actually say the word victim here. When the recruiter made choice of his victim, he is required to draw from his diary a view of his character, opinions, principles, and connections. This he is to transmit to the superiors for their examination, and that they may compare it with the diaries which they have already received, perhaps from different recruiters. When the choice of the recruiter is approved, the superiors determine which of the recruiters will be best qualified to perform the task of seducing the candidate. Two different methods were recommended, one of which was to be employed in enticing men who were somewhat advanced in life and distinguished by science. The other was to be used in seducing young men whose character had not been formed. All right, there's some stuff on the bottom here of this page I'd like to read. Not that I'm trying to get too much into this, but every little bit we learn, the better, I think. Okay, as a specimen of the journals kept by the recruiters and of the characters which the Illuminates selected for propagating their principle, we shall give the character of Zwack, Z-W-A-C-K, dominated Cato, as it is described in the table of his recruiter Ajax. That would be one of the first two recruiters we read about at the beginning of this encyclopedia topic. Francis Xavier Zwack was the son of Philip Zwack, probably saying his name wrong, commissionary of the Chamber of Companies, or Compots, and was born at Raftborn at the time of his initiation, 29 May 1776. He was 20 years of age and had finished his college education. He was then about 5 feet high. You're not going to believe this description. His person emaciated with debauchery. So he was into debauchery, decadency, doing nasty things. His constitution bordering on melancholy, his eyes of dirty gray, weak, languishing, his complexion pale and fallow, his health weak, and his much hurt by frequent disorders, his nose long, his nose was crooked and hooked, his hair light brown, his gait was precipient, so I guess he walked funny, his eyes always cast towards the ground, under the nose of each side of the mouth a mole. Wow. Sounds like an ugly guy. His heart tender and philanthropic in an extraordinary degree. But stoic when in a melancholy mood. Otherwise a true friend, circumspect, refined, extremely secret, often speaking advantageously of himself. Envious of other people's perfections, voluptuous, endeavoring to improve himself, little calculated for numerous assemblies to sprite him. Some of these words. Though contradicting him, a lover of novelties, on religion and conscience widely differing from the received ideas and thinking precisely as he ought, to become a good member of the order. So all these characteristics makes up a good member of the order. Just imagine this 5 foot tall, short guy with a crooked nose and a kind of cranky character would probably go along with these secret societies and their efforts to persuade other people to belong and do whatever else they're doing for personal gain and wealth. His predominant passions are pride, love, glory. He is easily provoked. He has an extraordinary propensity for the mysteries. He wants to learn about the mysteries, witchcraft, secrets that others don't know. A perpetual custom of speaking of himself and of his own perfections. He is also a perfect master in the arts of dissimulation, a proper person to be received into the order. All those things is a proper person to be received into the order. As applying himself particularly to the study of the human heart, such is the character of the beloved disciple of Gustav, the incomparable Cato, and a leader of the sect of the Illuminati. You wouldn't believe it if I weren't reading it, would you? All right, moving on to the next page, 205. With men of knowledge who had already imbued the principles of modern philosophism, for no true philosophers were to be attempted. So they wanted people who were into modern philosophy, not real philosophers. The recruiter was to assume the character of a philosopher well acquainted with the mysteries of ancient times. I'm going to get into this stuff I've been saying all along, is that there's two components to these Illuminati cults, organizations. And one is their recruiting of people and getting in high places all over the world in control of money. And they have their own goals to destroy society as we know it. So the material aspect. And the other is the mysteries, so the spiritual or immaterial, invisible world aspect. Witchcraft. He was to descend upon the importance. So he was to talk about the importance of the secret doctrines transmitted by traditions. To quote the, I guess the Hierophants or the masters of India, the priest of Isis. I was surprised to see that here. So this is another one of those religions they quote. The priest of Isis in Egypt, and those of Eleusis with the Pythagorean school in Greece, and apparently part of a religion of Zoroastrianism in Iran. Stuff I've been learning over the months I've been reading some of this new stuff. He was to learn by heart passages from Eucrates, Syrio, Seneca, and he might have them ready upon all occasions. So apparently he had all these mystery documents I've been going over, like the secret doctrine, the Kabbalah, the information about Isis and Osiris and Horus and Ra. All these ancient mysteries are part of the tools they use to recruit people. He was to throw out hints that these secret doctrines, like Helene Blavatsky's secret doctrine, Annie Besant, Alice Bailey, Aleister Crowley, all the stuff I've been going over, he was to throw out hints that the secret doctrines explain the difficult questions concerning the origin and order of the universe, the providence of God, the nature of the soul, its immortality and future destination. He was to inspire them with the belief that the knowledge of these things would render life more agreeable and pain more supportable, and would enlarge their ideas of the majesty of God. He was then to declare that he had been initiated into these mysteries. So these recruiters were supposed to pretend they had been initiated into these great mysteries. The mysteries of magicians, sorcerers, witches, people with all kinds of power, like King Solomon and his magic ring that he could call forth demons. You suppose that would attract people, promising them that stuff? If the candidate expressed any curiosity to be made acquainted with them, the recruiter was first to ascertain his opinions upon some leading points by proposing to him, remember the S's are F's and I mistakenly read them, I have to kind of make it right in my mind here, proposing to him to write a dissertation upon certain questions. Should the answers not please the recruiter, he was to relinquish his prey. So they talk about these people they're recruiting as prey. In other words, I mentioned in this, victim. But should they be satisfactory, the candidate was then admitted to the first degree. And I said this also, like the Freemasons, you can't just go walk up on the door and say, I want to be a Freemason. Somebody from the inside's got to recommend you. And then once you get in, the first, second, and third degree are probably easier to obtain. But if they do observe your character and you're not one of the kind that they want, like I've been reading here, you never go anywhere. You just belong to the social group and everything is hunky-dory, parties or business contacts. But if you're one of the ones who are that they can control, and you have the right kind of mindset and you're willing to go up and do anything, well, then you might just wind up being one of these politicians that gets elected or presidents we have these days. You might go somewhere if you're an evil character. That's me saying that. I'm interpreting it the best I can. I'm reading this stuff. I think I have a good mind to have that has some common sense thinking capabilities to it. And what do you think about what I've been reading? There is a comment section below on this video. So he was to relinquish his prey if they should be unsatisfactory. But should they be satisfactory, the candidate was to be admitted into the first degree. When the selected victim was young and had not imbued any of those opinions which corresponded with the principles of the sect, a different method was to be followed. Let your first care, says the Wusthof, or the leaders, to his recruiters. So let your first care to his recruiters, he said, be to gain the affection, the confidence, and the esteem of those whom you are to entice into the order. So they are supposed to seduce people. Let your whole conduct be such that they shall surmit something more in you than you would to show. That you belong to some secret and powerful society, excite by degrees, not at once, a within your candidate, a wish in your candidate to belong to the familiar, similar society. So you want to entice other people after you tell them some things that he wants to, wishes he was part of your society, your secret society. Remember, this is 1805 writing here. Certain arguments and certain books which the recruiter must have will greatly contribute to raise such a wish. Such, for example, are those which treat of the union and strength of associations. Every recruiter must be provided with books of this sort, but that their success might not depend solely upon books, Wusthof gave to his disciples a specimen of the articles which they might employ. So the recruiters were being trained on how to recruit people. The recruiter might begin by observing that a child in the cradle, so this is an example here, think about this, abandoning to itself, is entirely helpless, and that it is by the assistance of others that it acquires strength, and that the princes owe their greatness and their power to the union of their subjects. Then the recruiter might touch on the importance of knowing mankind and the arts of governing them. These are the things they teach people they recruit. And that one man of parts might easily lead hundreds, even thousands, but if he but knew his advantages. So they promise people that by joining our cult, our secret society, we can help you become a leader of men. He was next to dwell upon the defects of civil society. So the Illuminati, or these secret societies, like to point out the defects of civil societies. And interestingly enough, my thinking here, they control our secret society. They control our civil society. They control our governments. They control the economic powerful people in our world. So they control the very forces that do ugly things in our world. In other words, make our leaders look bad and rich people, wealthy corporations, etc. Of course, not all rich people or whatever. So they control it and they create all this. And then they use that to recruit people into the Illuminati, saying, look at all this evil out there. You can become the leader of men and you can change all this. But you have to have obedience to the Illuminati. Just emphasizing my understanding here. He was next to dwell upon the defects of civil society, to mention how little relief a man can obtain even from his best friends, and how very necessary it is for individuals to support one another. In these days, to add that men would triumph over even heaven were they but united. He was to adduce as examples the influence of the Freemasons and of the Jesuits. For earlier I read that these were his arch enemies, and now he's using their success as organizations, the Freemasons, the Jesuits, as examples of, to united we are more powerful. You can be more successful. He was to assert that all the great events which take place in the world depend upon hidden causes which these societies powerfully influence. Wow. So all the good things that happen, the secret societies did them. That's not the way I see it. The secret societies brought us revolutions, World War I, World War II, 9/11, President John Kennedy's assassination of the President of Costa Rica, Panama, and so many other people. Look at all those countries that were overthrown since 9/11, Afghan, Iraq, Syria under siege right now. And then, of course, President Donald Trump sending Tillerson over there to help Saudi Arabia and Iraq organize an offensive against Iran. These guys are busy. He was to awake in the breast of his pupil the desire of reigning in secret, a preparing in his closet a new constitution for the world. Wow. Preparing in his closet a new constitution for the world, and of governing those who think they govern others. So these people that are recruited into the Illuminati govern over our leaders who think that they govern us, but they're told what to do by these Illuminati thugs. Monsters, if you will. After these and other artifices of the same kind, have been employed, if the candidate be inspired with the ardor to be initiated, and give satisfactory answers to the questions proposed to him, he is immediately admitted as a novice. But should he reject all means and seduction, let him take heed. Oh boy. So should he reject all means of seduction, let him take heed to himself. For the vengeance of secret societies is not a common vengeance. It is the hidden fire of wrath. It is irreconcilable. It scarcely ever does it cause the pursuit of its victims, ever does it cease. Remember, these F's are S's and it messes me up. Ever does it cease the pursuit of its victims until he has seen them immolated. Well, so if you turn these people down, the vengeance of the secret societies is not a common vengeance. Wow. The period of the novitiate varied according to the age of the new convert to the Illuminati. At first, it continued 3 years for those under 18 years of age, 2 years for those between 18 and 20, and 1 year for those who were near 30. But it was afterwards shortened. So that was your training period. The novice was not acquainted with any of the order except his recruiter, under whose direction he remained during his novitiate. The first lesson which he was taught respected the inviolable nature of the secrecy which every illuminee was obliged to observe. So the first lesson was the importance of keeping things secret. He was told that silence and secrecy were the very soul of the order. The ingenuousness was a virtue only with respect to his superiors, and that disrupt and reserve were fundamental principles. He was enjoined never to speak of any circumstance relating to the order, concerning his own admission, or the degree which he had received, not even before brethren, without the strongest necessity, and was required to sign a declaration to this purpose. The novice was next taught the dictionary of the order, its geography, calendar, and cipher. Apparently they have a different calendar than our calendar today, 2017 years since Jesus was born. And of course the Jewish calendar is like 5,777 this year. And so this calendar began, as I will get to here, to prevent the probability of discovery. Every Illuminati received a new name, so you would get a new name if you were recruited into the Illuminati, which was characteristics of his dispositions or of the services which were expected of him. Yeah. Wusthof, as we have observed, was called Spartacus because he pretended to wage war against those oppressors who have reduced mankind to slavery. So that's another point I'd like to make here that I've noticed in the studies. They think the world we live in now with rules and laws has reduced mankind to some kind of slavery. So they need to take that to the nth degree and get rid of all rules and all laws, and all of us will fight in little clans or groups against other people, like in ancient times. Turn the sheep into wolves. Is that what they want? And Zach, as we have seen. So Zach committed suicide. So they want to reduce mankind to flat earth slavery. And Zach, as we have seen, was named Cato because he had written a dissertation in favor of suicide and had once determined to commit that crime. According to the new geography of the order, Bavaria was called Achaia, Munich was called Athens, Venia was Rome, Wusthof was denominated Carthage, Weilsburg was denominated Carthage, and Ingolstadt, where the university that Wusthof worked at, the fountain of the order, was called Ephesus, and by the profound adepts Ephesus. The novice had also to learn the person calendar, which the order had adopted, the Perfine calendar. Their new era began 630 AD. So I suppose if you took 1017 and added 360, so that's like 1,377 would be their calendar year for this year. So 1377 would be their calendar year, something like that today, if their calendar year started in 630 AD. So they must think of themselves as a significant order. If the Christian calendar started since Jesus' birth, and apparently the Jewish calendar started from 5,777 years ago, maybe when they were led out of Egypt by Moses, whatever. I mean, those are big significant dates. So anyways, the Illuminati have their own calendar date, is my point. The months received new names. May was called Adropakafo. June was Cardad. July, their month. So this might be some kind of code they have to learn these new names for months and days and years. The cipher, that means code, confided the numbers which correspond to the letters of the alphabet. In this order, A, B, C, D was 12, 11, 10, 9. So they had to learn these codes. The novice had next to study the statutes of the Illuminati, the laws, which he was assured contained nothing injurious to the state, to the religion, and to good morals. He was next desired to apply himself to acquire the morality of the order, which he was to do not by reading the gospel, but by perusing Epictetus, Seneca, Antoninus, and by studying the works of modern prophets, Wieland, Mariners, and Hellevistus. The study of man was also recommended as the most interesting of these sciences. He was taught this study not merely as a science, but as an art. The model of a journal was given him, and he was required to insert in it observations upon the character of every person he had happened to meet with. So these Illuminati people are taught to have a journal and write down the characteristics of every person that they interact with, meet with. To quicken his diligence, the recruiter occasionally examined his journal. So your recruiter would examine your journal, where you have to keep track and write down all the characteristics of all the people you meet with. In the meantime, the recruiter was watching him as a sentinel and noting down regularly observations upon the defects and merits of his pupil, which he always sent to his superiors. Wow. Not quite sure how far I'm going to get on these pages. Obviously, I have to make a couple videos here. But to me, all this information, line by line, is very important. The great object of the recruiter was to entangle the novice and to bind him indissolubly into the order. With this in view, he required the novice to draw a faithful picture of himself, under the pretense that he would thus know himself better. He desired him to write down his name, his age, his country, his residence, his employment, to give a list of the books in his library, to state his revenue, to enumerate his friends, enemies, and the cause of his enemies. He was also to give a familiar account of his father and mother, his brothers, his sisters, and to be very careful in pointing out their passions and prejudices, their strengths and weak sides. Wow, you gotta give all the details of everybody in your family. In the meantime, the recruiter was occupied to drawing up a new statement of everything he had been able to discover of the character and conduct of the Nevoid, the new adept, the Nevois. The statement was transmitted to his superiors and compared with the former. If the novice was approved, he was then admitted to the second degree upon his answering in a satisfactory manner 24 grand questions, which might enable the order to judge his principles and the credit of which he was entitled, and would fix him down by stronger ties to the authority of the superiors. The desirable principles of the Illuminati now begin to appear, as will be evident from the following questions, which we have selected. Have you seriously reflected on the importance of the step you take? These are questions they ask the novice, the new recruit. In binding yourself to the engagements that are unknown to you. Should you ever discover in the order anything wicked or unjust to be done, what part would you take? Do you, moreover, grant the power of life and death to our order or society? Are you disproved upon all occasions? Are you disposed, remember these F's or S's, are you disposed upon all occasions to give the preferences to the men of our order over all other men? Do you subject yourself to a blind obedience without any reflection whatsoever? The novice, having done surrendered his confidence, his will, and his life to the devotion of the conspirators, and thus subscribed with his own hand and confirmed by his oath a resolution to become the most abject slave, was now deemed qualified to ascend to the second degree called Minerva. Oh my. So now you're qualified for being a Minerva in the Illuminati. Listen to what happens next. In the dead hour of midnight, he was conducted to a retired apartment where two of the order were waiting to receive him. The superior, or his delegate, appearing standing in a fervor and threatening posture. Can you see it? Here comes the novice. He held a glimmering lamp in one hand and a naked sword lay before him. So he has a sword in the other hand. The novice was asked whether he still persisted in his intention of adhering to the order. Upon answering in the affirmative, he was ordered into the dark room, there to meditate in silence on his resolution. On his return, he was strictly and repeatedly questioned if he was determined to give implicit obedience to all the laws of the order. Oh my. The recruiter became security for his pupil, and then requested for him the protection of the order. When the superior granted with great solemnity protection, that nothing would be found there hurtful to religion, to morals, or to the state. Having thus said, the superior takes up the naked sword, and pointing at the heart of the novice, threatens him with the fatal consequences of betraying the secrets of the order. The novice again takes an oath by which he binds himself in the most unlimited manner, to serve the order with his life, honor, and estate, and to observe an inviolable obedience and fidelity to all his superiors. He is then admitted a Minerva, and henceforth is allowed to attend the academy of the sect, the cult, the Illuminati. The Minerva Academy was composed of 10, 12, or 15 Minervas. Thought that was interesting. You know, a witch's coven is, the number is usually 13 witches to a coven. They don't have 14 or 12, they have 13. So I guess if one of the witches dies, they have to find another one to have a full coven. But these Minerva Academies were compiled of 10, 12, or 15 Minervas, and placed under the direction of a major Illuminati. It met twice every month in an inner apartment, separated from the other rooms in the mansion by an antechamber, the door of which was to be shut with care during the meeting, and strongly secured by bolts. So this a lot sounds like the Freemasons and how they do it, with a guard at the door when they have the Freemason meetings, secret societies. I believe they all do this. At the commencement, all right. At the commencement of every meeting, the president, again the F is where the S should be, messes me up. The president read and commemorated upon some select passages of the Bible, the Seneca, the Epictetus. I'm going to look some of these occult or biblical documents up, spiritual. The Marcus Aurelius Confucius. A lot of people have heard about Confucius from the Orient. Evidently with a view of diminuting the reverence of the sacred writings by thus placing them on a level with the heathen moralist. Then each brother is asked what books he has read since the last meeting, what observations he has made, and what services he has performed for promoting the success of the order. To each Minerva Academy, a library belonged. This was formed by the contributions of the brethren, by the presence of books, and by another method very extraordinary. You're not going to believe what I'm going to say. That says here, all Illuminates acting as librarians or keepers of the archives were admonished to steal such books or manuscripts as might be useful to the order. At one time, sending a list of books which will be he wished, here we go with that S again, wished to be embezzled from the library at Carmes. So I guess Wusthof or the leaders would send a list of books that they wished would be stolen from the local major library. Wusthof says all these would be of much greater use if they were in our hands. So they were getting their recruits to steal from the county library, state library, and he says these books would be greater use in our hands. And the says here, what do these rascals do with all these books? That's what Wusthof said. What do these rascals do with all these books? They're better in our hands. Go steal them. Every brother at his admission was required to declare to what art or science he meant chiefly to apply, and it was expected he should afterwards every year give an account of the discoveries or improvements which he had made. So they required of these initiates to study arts or sciences, and I guess for information for the Illuminati. All the other brethren who were occupied in the same studies were desired to give him every professed affiliation, assistance. I gotta change these F's out with these S's. Every possible assistance. Thus a kind of academy was formed to which those who could not serve it by their talents might give pecuniary contributions. So if you weren't giving intellectual assistance to the Illuminati, you might steal for them. That this Arcarnany might have the appearance of a literal society, prizes were annually distributed. The best discourse was published and the profit sent to the coffers of the order. Every month the president was to take a review of the faults which he had observed in his pupils and examine them concerning those which they might have been conscious of themselves. And it would be an unpardonable neglect, says the statutes, should any pupil pretend that during the space of the whole month he had remarked nothing reprehensible. It is impossible to read these rules without admiring them. Were men but half as anxious and attentive and careful to render themselves good citizens and good men, then these men would render themselves successful conspirators. What a blessed world we would see. So the author of this encyclopedia says, if these men were to apply themselves to doing good things for the world as much as they're applying themselves to this conspiracy, if they were trying to do good things, we would have a great world. The Minerval was rigorously scrutinized whether he was ready to submit to every torture, and even to commit suicide rather than to give any information against the order. Suicide was reckoned not only innocent, but honorable, and was also represented as a particular species of whatever this is. In order to discover the sentiments of the Minervas upon this subject, they were required to write a dissertation upon the character and death of Cato or any other familiar subject. They were also desired to discuss the favorable doctrine of Wusthof, that the end justifies the means, a principle of the most pernicious tendency, which would render culinary association, fedition, and thereof laudable and excellent. Next, they were called upon to complete a dissertation by which their opinion concerning kings and priests might be ascertained. If they performed all these talks with the spirit of an infidel, so someone of not believing in any religion, then the desperate semels of the conspirator, then they were judged worthy of becoming promoted to the degree of minor illumine. So if they performed all these talks with the spirit of an infidel, they were approved for the next degree. All right, I'm going to try to wing this here. I did not pre-read past here. I did not think I would get all that done in an hour and a half. So I'll just continue reading to try to eat up another 20 minutes so I can finish this video and share this information. I will continue reading from this encyclopedia published in 1805. I have 16 pages here on the Illuminati, and it gets much more explosive. But I think this pre-material is kind of important. The minor Illuminates held meetings similar to those of the Minerva Academy, so you're getting the next degree. It was necessary that the president should be the one who was raised to the degree of priest and initiated into the mysteries. But he was required to persuade his pupils that beyond the degree which he had attained, there were no mysteries to be disclosed. The minor Illuminates were to be trained that they might look upon themselves as the founders of the order, that by this powerful motive they might be animated by diligence and exhortation. With this view, hints were scattered rather than precepts enjoined. It was insinuated that the world was not so delightful as it ought to be, that the happiness for which man was made is prevented by the misfortunes of some and the crimes of others, that the wicked have power over the good, that partial insurrection is useless. Again, F's and E's here. Useless, and that peace, contentment, and safety might be easily obtained by means drawn from the greatest degree of force of which human nature is capable. Such views, it is added, actuating a secret society would not only be innocent, but most worthy of the wife and well disposed. Wusthof had formed, with particular care, a code for this degree, which was entitled Infrastructures or Formula Useful Laboratories of Illuminati. Instructions for the formation of the Illuminati. These instructions discover the astonishing knowledge of human nature and are drawn up with such a degree of systematic coolness which perhaps no conspirator before him ever exhibited. He lays down rules by which the character of almost any person may be ascertained. So they have some kind of rules so people can write down characteristics of how we behave, how you behave, how I behave, and they can categorize us. He recommends to the minor Illuminates to attend to the conduct of any person entrusted to their care at two periods when he is attempted to be what he ought to be or ought not to be, and when removed from the influence of every external temptation, he follows the dictates of his inclination. They were to study the particular habits and rulings, passions of each, to kindle his ardor by desiccating on the dignity of the order and the unity of its labors, to ensued a spirit of observation by asking questions and appalling the wisdom of the answers, to correct the failings of their pupil by speaking of them as if they were not his, and thus making him judge of his own cause. So there are instructions on here on how the instructor is supposed to handle the students. To instruct and advise, not by tedious disclamation, but by sometimes dropping a few words to the purpose, when the mind should be in a proper state to receive them. Above all, they were directed to avail themselves of those moments when they observed a pupil discontented with the world. So whenever they observed a pupil who was discontented with the world, they had to pay attention to that. It is then, says Wusthof, you must press the swelling heart. So when they're discontented with the world, Wusthof said, it is then you must press their swelling hearts, stimulate their sensibility, and demonstrate how necessarily secret societies are for the attainment of a better order of things. Having passed with applause through the states of prohibition already described, the minor Illuminati is promoted to the rank of major Illuminati, or Scotch novice. As major Illuminati, he is encompassed with more rigid chains, so he is getting more duties. As a Scottish novice, he is dispatched to a missionary into Masonic lodges and to convert the brethren to illumination. So he is dispatched as a missionary into the Masonic lodges to convert the brethren to the Illuminati. So I guess they're infiltrating the Freemasons' lodges. All this schooling, all these things I've been talking about. The candidate for this degree is strictly examined in order to discover what opinions he now entertains concerning the object of the society, the motives that prompted him to join it, whether he is disposed still to cooperate with the rest of the brethren is accomplished for the grand object, and whether he be a member of another society, and what are the duties which it requires. The fertile genius of Wusthof is not exhausted. He has still in reserve artifices more profound and bonds more powerful. He reinforces his resources. There I go with the RF. Every time I read this, it's that F is supposed to be an S. I don't know why this encyclopedia did that. If anybody watching my video has an idea why they did that in 1805, when the F's were S's in the encyclopedia, I'd be curious to know why. But anyways, so when I changed the F to S, his resources keep pace with the process of his schemes. All these F's got to be S's. He now lays a snare for his pupils, from which he hopes none can escape, and therefore he flatters himself that they are his forever. He demands of every candidate of higher degrees to write as a proof of confidence a minute and faithful account of his whole life, without any reserve or dissummation. Reserve or dissummation would indeed be vain, for the most secret circumstances of his life are already well known to the adepts, by means of innumerable spies, who by the appointments of the superiors have unknown to him been watching and scrutinizing all his actions and words, his temper, passions, and opinions. So they spy on each other 24/7. You never know when you're in these organizations. They're all spying on each other and making reports and sending them higher up a couple times a month. Can you imagine? Now is presented to the candidate the code of the brother recruiter, called by the order the novice Tefom, something in French here, I guess. Know thyself. This is a catechism containing from the 1,000 to 1,500 questions. Wow. So now you have to go take a catechism, some kind of church schooling thing here, containing from 1,000 to 1,500 questions concerning his person, his health, his education, his opinions, his inclinations, his habits, his passions, his prejudices, and even his weaknesses. Questions are also proposed respecting his acquaintances, his relations, his friends, his enemies. The candidate is required to enumerate his favorite colors, to describe his language, the nature of his conversation, his gait, his gestures. Nothing in short is omitted which can tend to distinguish his character as an individual or a member of the society. Upon many questions in his character, 30, 40, nearly 100 questions are proposed. The following specimen will enable the reader to judge what astonishing care Wusthof employed to differentiate characters. In his gait, flow, quick or firm. So the way you walk, is it quick or firm or slow or sloppy? I don't know how you walk or how you move. Are his steps long, short, dragging, lazy, skipping? Is his language regular, disorderly, interrupted? In speaking, does he agitate his hands? I do this with my hands when I'm speaking many times. His head or his body with veracity? Does he close upon the person he is speaking to? So some people, when you talk to them, they get right up close. They want to know all this stuff about their recruits. Does he hold him by the arms, clothes, or buttonhole? Is he a great talker? If so, why? Is it through prudence, ignorance, respect, or sloth? Concerning his education, is he questioned? To whom does he owe? Has he always been under the eyes of his parents? Has he been brought up? How has he been brought up? Has he, next page. Any esteem for his masters? Oh, there we go. That F is there messing me up. Has he any esteem for his masters? Has he traveled, and in what countries? By these questions, his temperament and dispositions might be accurately known. His leading passions would be discovered by the following queries. When he finds himself with different parties, which does he adopt? The strongest or the weakest? The wittiest or the moth? Or the most stupid? Those F's and S's get me. Or does he form a third? Is he constant and firm in spite of all obstacles? How is he to be gained? By praise and by flattery, or by low courtship, by women, money? So how can they bribe you? What gets your attention? Women, money? Entreaties of his friends? Does he love satire? And on what does he exercise that talent? On religion, hypocrisy, intolerance, government, ministers, monks? All these questions are to be answered and illustrated by facts. It is necessary to observe that the recruiters also give in writing answers to all these questions. When the candidate has thus given a minute history of his life and revealed all his secrets, his follies, his errors, his vices, his crimes, Wusthof triumphantly exclaims, "Now I have him. I defy him to hurt us. If he should betray us, we have also his secrets." Wow. So I said they want to know all this stuff. It's like Wusthof says here, page 208. Now I have him. I know everything about him. The adept is next introduced into a dark apartment, where he solemnly swears to keep secret whatever he may learn from the order. He then delivers up the history of his life, sealed, and when it is read to the lodge and compared with the character drawn of him by the brother recruiters, a corner of the veil is now lifted up, still, however, with extreme caution. Nothing appears palatable but the purest principles and most generous designs. So they're slowly lifting the veil. About the Illuminati to the candidate, but slowly and not all. At the same time, many things are darkly subjugated, which are incompatible with purity and generosity. So now they start to reveal the secrets to the candidate. They have everything on him. For while the utmost care is employed to deceive the understanding, nothing is neglected that can tend secretly to corrupt the heart. A number of questions are asked, the evident intention of which is to make the adept discontented with the present moral government of the world, and to excite the desire of attempting a great revolution. Wow. After answering these questions, the secretary opens the code of the lodge, and having informed the young Illuminati that the object of the order is to diffuse the pure truth and to make virtue triumph, he proceeds to show how this is to be accomplished by freeing men from their prejudices, enlightening their understandings. To attain this, continues the secretary, we must trace the origins of all sciences. We must reward oppressed talents. We must undertake the education of youth, and forming an indissoluble league among the most powerful geniuses, we must boldly, though with prudence, combat superstition, incredulity, and folly, and at length form our people to true, just, and uniform principles on all subjects. The secretary adds that in attempting to divest vice of its power, that the virtuous may be rewarded even in this world, the order is counteracted by the priest, the princes, and the political constitutions of nations. So this is no small undertaking here, you think? That, however, it was not intended to excite revolutions or oppose force by force, but merely to bind the hands of the protectors of the disorder. So they want to bind the hands of the protectors of disorder and to govern without appearing to command. So they want to govern from behind the scenes. So we the people, like I've been saying all along, do not see the people who really control our world. And this is 1805, this was written. So they've been busy for 200 years, as I have been saying, with all the books I've gone over. That the powers of the earth must be encompassed with a legion of indefatigable men. So all the powers of the world must be turned over to a bunch of men who are indefatigable, untiring, all directing their labors towards the improvement of the human state, the human nature. Were there but a certain number of such men in every country, each might from two others, let these, he says, only be united, and nothing will be impossible to our order. Wow. So every man or they keep multiplying their number, nothing will be impossible to our order. All this is very specious. It is well contrived to stimulate the imagination of the young and the heart of the generous and benevolent, while under all this pretended regard to virtue and to the happiness of mankind is concealed a most formidable conspiracy against the peace of the world. Oh my! Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.